Hi, I'm Abby Chaddock, a project manager and grant writer at Stepwell Strategies. Welcome to Module 8 of the Learn As You Go grant writing course. In this module, we're going to walk through how to prepare for managing a federal grant. I'll give you a high-level overview of the grant award and management process, so you'll know what to expect. Keep in mind, individual grant programs can vary and may change over time. By the end of this module, you'll have a good understanding of the key questions you should be asking your grant officer as you implement your award. Great news! Our example applicant, the Very Good Farm, submitted their grant application, and they've just received the official notice that they've been awarded. Now that they've been awarded the grant, what comes next? In this module, we'll break down the next steps, including understanding the award agreement, project management, budgeting and finance, compliance considerations, and reporting.
When your application is awarded, you'll receive something called a Notice of Award, or sometimes a Notice of Award and Grant Agreement. This important document will include key details like your award number, the start and end dates for the budget period, which is also known as the performance period, your approved budget, the approved cost share or match if applicable, and it will sometimes include specific program requirements. Now, let's talk about the start and end dates for the performance period. These dates are critical because the end date is the deadline by which you must spend your grant funds and complete your project deliverables. If your Notice of Award requires a dated signature and the signature date is different from the performance period start date, confirm with your grant officer when you can actually begin spending your funds. Once you have confirmed the start and end dates for your budget and deliverables, it's important that everyone involved in the project, including staff, contractors, subawards, and the finance team, are clear on these dates. You'll also likely receive the award terms and conditions alongside your agreement. These terms are usually specific to the federal agency managing your grant. While it's usually a long document, it's worth skimming through to make sure you understand key things like the requirements for financial and performance reporting, the payment process, and any rules for subawards and contractors. As the recipient organization, you are in the driver's seat of your project. The USDA will assign a grant officer to your award, and this person will be your go-to contact for any questions or concerns you have about your grant. If you need prior approval for anything, your grant officer is the one you'll reach out to. If something isn't clear or you need guidance, it's up to you to get in touch with your grant officer. Grant officers are typically available by email, so it's a good idea to get things in writing. But if you need more support, don't hesitate to request a video call or phone meeting. Sometimes a face-to-face conversation is the best way to clarify things. The USDA may also offer additional resources or training specifically for your project. Some grants require regular grantee meetings or even a grantee conference. Here are a few tips for getting started once you've been awarded. Review your proposal work plan and timeline to see if any changes are needed. Have there been any staff changes? Will someone new be taking on key responsibilities? Update your work plan and timeline as needed. If there are significant changes, like a change in the project director or a deliverable, you'll need to get pre-approval from your grant officer before making those updates. Once you've updated your work plan and timeline, we recommend hosting a kickoff meeting with your project team, whether that's internal staff, partners, or contractors. This is a great time to confirm project deliverables, assign responsibilities, and make sure everyone is on the same page with the timeline. Over the course of your project, there may be times when you need to make changes to your activities, budgets, or subawards. It's important to remember to review your grant terms and conditions for the specific guidelines on how to request revisions and get USDA approval. Project revisions. If you need to make significant changes to your project, like modifying an objective or changing a deliverable, you'll likely need prior approval from the USDA. Even if these changes don't affect your budget, it's still important to get written approval first. Changes to subawards. If you need to shift a subaward from one partner to another, you'll need to get prior approval from your grant officer before moving forward. Request for project and/or budget extension. If you need more time to complete your project activities than what is in the award agreement, you may be able to request a project extension. Just be sure to reach out to your grant officer well in advance of your grant's end date. Extensions typically need to be requested early, so plan ahead. Let's talk about budget basics. Your grant award includes an approved budget, which you'll find in your grant agreement. If your grant spans multiple years, you may have been asked to break down your budget by year in your proposal. One key thing to note, the amount listed for each budget category in your agreement represents the total for the entire performance period of the grant. This is the most important figure to focus on. The actual amount you spend year by year may vary, but the total budget for each category over the entire grant period is the baseline you'll work with. Now, when it comes to bookkeeping, it's crucial to work closely with your bookkeeper or accountant. Make sure all grant income and expenses are clearly identifiable and traceable to the grant. You'll need to keep documentation for every expense, things like invoices, receipts, and payroll statements. The only exception are your indirect expenses. You do not need to keep receipts for those. Your bookkeeper also needs to know the performance start and end dates of your grant and be familiar with allowable costs within your approved budget. If you requested indirect costs as part of your grant, you can request a percentage of your payment request as indirect. This funding is available for you to use at your discretion to support your organization's needs. If your organization spends more than $1 million in federal funds during a fiscal year, be sure to talk to your accountant about audit requirements. Lastly, let's talk about budget revisions. If you need to make a revision that's 10% or greater of your total award amount, you'll need to get prior written approval from your grant officer before making those changes. Different USDA programs have different processes for how grantees receive their funds. So it's important to carefully review your grant agreement's terms and conditions to understand how payments will work for your specific grant. There are three main payment types. Reimbursement. This is the most common payment method. With reimbursement, you'll first pay for your grant-related expenses, and then the USDA will reimburse you for those costs. Cash advance. Some USDA programs allow grantees to request a cash advance, meaning you can receive the funds upfront before paying for your expenses. After receiving the cash, you'll need to report to the USDA once the funds have been spent. Drawdown. In certain cases, grantees can draw down funds as needed throughout the project. This method lets you access funds on a rolling basis. Typically, payment requests are made either through a web portal or direct email to the USDA. The frequency with which you request payment is often up to you, but it's a good idea to request payments monthly, especially if your payment method is reimbursement. This will help keep things on track and ensure a steady cash flow throughout the project. Now, let's talk about some special considerations for specific budget categories, things like subawards, contractors, consultants, and equipment. First, subawards. These are organizations that receive funding through your grant award and take on a significant portion of the project. They might be responsible for executing one or more deliverables. Just like you had to register your organization in SAM.gov to apply for the grant, subawardees must also register and obtain a unique entity identifier. As the grant recipient, it's your responsibility to keep track of the active SAM registration for each subawardee. For each subaward, you'll need a subaward agreement signed between you, the award recipient, and the subawardee organization. If your grant spans multiple years, it's a good idea to sign an agreement annually that includes the deliverables the subaward is responsible for, what you'll provide to support the subawardee's approved budget, and details about the payment process and invoicing frequency. Before finalizing your subaward agreements, take a look at your performance report template. You'll likely need data from your subawardees to complete these reports, so it's smart to include the specific data you need them to collect right in the agreement. It's also helpful to align the invoicing process with data collection. This way, the subawardee can send updates on their progress and data along with each invoice. In the resources section for this module, you'll find a link to the Federal Demonstration Partnerships template for subaward contracts, which you can download and customize for your needs. Next, let's talk about contractors and consultants. These are experts you brought on board to handle specific tasks in your project. Their costs are associated with purchasing goods or procuring services. Similar to subawards, you'll need to communicate clearly the budget and deliverables to your contractors or consultants, and they, in turn, are responsible for completing those deliverables and sending you invoices for payment. We recommend having a signed agreement with each contractor, but keep in mind there are federal rules around procurement, which we'll cover in more detail in a future slide. The USDA defines equipment as any tangible personal property that has a useful life of more than 1 year and costs more than $10,000 per unit. If you're purchasing equipment for your project, you'll likely need to report it to the federal and/or state government once it's acquired, especially if the total cost is over $10,000. Note that if your organization is providing equipment to subaward partners or other entities, your organization will likely need to maintain ownership and documentation until the equipment is valued less than $10,000. Be sure to check with your grant officer to clarify the specific reporting requirements for equipment, so you stay in compliance with those regulations. Now, if your project involves construction, it's important to check with your grant officer about any specific construction-related requirements or regulations, especially if they're not outlined in your grant's terms and conditions. Construction projects often have very particular rules. For example, some projects may require you to complete an environmental assessment before starting any construction work. Your grant officer will be the best resource for ensuring you're following all necessary steps. As a federal grant recipient, you'll need to follow federal procurement rules, which are outlined in the Code of Federal Regulations. These rules are especially important if your grant involves consultants, contractors, construction, or equipment purchases. The key thing to remember is that procurement requirements depend on the size of your purchase. For purchases under $250,000, you can use informal procurement methods. For purchases over $250,000, you'll follow formal procurement procedures. We highly recommend reviewing the federal procurement standards and reaching out to your grant officer with any questions before you start making purchases. You can find the link to these regulations and the resources and supplemental materials for this module. Your award agreement will include important details about your reporting requirements. There are two main types of reports you'll need to submit: performance reports, which cover your project's deliverables and activities, and financial reports, which track your budget and expenses. For both types of reports, you'll typically submit them either annually or semi-annually, plus a final report once your grant is complete. Sometimes the exact reporting deadlines aren't always clearly stated, so it's a good idea to confirm with your grant officer the specific due dates and the performance period for each reporting cycle. The performance report is where you'll report on your progress towards the grant objectives, indicators, and deliverables. The USDA will typically provide a template for this report, which you'll submit either by email or through an online portal. When you receive your award agreement, take a close look at the performance reporting requirements. Specifically, check the objectives, indicators, and deliverables you committed to in your grant application. It's a good idea to think about how you can set up tools or tracking systems early on to capture the data you'll need for these reports. The sooner you start tracking, the easier it will be to gather the necessary information when it's time to report. We recommend you review the performance template at least 30 days before your first report is due. This will give you enough time to gather data and complete the report thoroughly without feeling rushed. The financial report provides a high-level overview of your spending, and it's typically submitted using the SF-425 form. This report is cumulative, meaning it shows how much of the award funding you've spent from the start of the grant award through the end of the reporting period. If your grant requires a match, it will also track how much of the required matching funds you've contributed.
Now, let's walk through how to complete the SF-425 form using a template tool with instructions. As part of Module 8, you have access to the SF-425 Federal Financial Report Instructions and Tracker tool. This tool is for your internal use to draft your SF-425 report prior to submission and easily see all your previous submissions in one place. Once you have drafted your report data, you will enter this data into the SF-425 Federal Financial Report form. This is typically submitted to your grant officer as a PDF, but it may also be submitted through your grant portal. Check your award terms and conditions or with your grant officer before your report deadline. You can access the current SF-425 form on grants.gov. Note that I am in the post-award reporting forms section. You will find the Federal Financial Report SF-425 here for download. The SF-425 Instructions and Tracker tool has instructions for each of the boxes on the form. We will go through this form together using our example applicant, Very Good Farms. In this example, Very Good Farms is completing their first financial report. Their award period is October 1st, 2024 through June 30th, 2026. The reporting period is October 1, 2024 through December 31, 2024. And the report is due on January 30th, 2025. They were awarded a $250,000 grant with an additional $25,000 in non-federal matching funds. Their accounting is done on an accrual basis. They have spent $50,000 in federal funds through the end of the reporting period, December 31st, and have contributed $2,500 in matching funds through the end of the reporting period. Box 1 is the awarding agency, which will be listed in your grant agreement. For our example applicant, Very Good Farms, their awarding agency is the FSA. Box 2 is the FAIN, or your Federal Award Identification Number. It can also be found in your award agreement. Box 3 is your organization's address. We recommend you use the same address as is listed in your Notice of Award and Agreement. Box 4A is your UEI, your Unique Identity Identifier. That's a 12-character alphanumeric identifier that the federal government uses to identify organizations in the System for Award Management, or SAM. If this is not located on your award agreement, you can find it in your SAM.gov account. Box 4B is your Employee Identification Number, or EIN. It's not always required, but you can include it here. Box 5 is your Recipient Account Number or Identifying Number. This is typically not required, but check with your grant officer on any specific instructions that the awarding agency has provided. Box 6 is your report type. Select the report type as applicable to your award in the report you are completing. For example, it could be quarterly, semi-annual, or annual. And if it's your final report, you would click Final. For this example report, we will select quarterly. Box 7 is the basis of accounting. This is how your organization does accounting with your books. You can select cash or accrual. Box 8 is your project grant period. This is the start and end date of your grant, which can be found on your notice agreement. The information in boxes 1 through 8 will be the same for every report, except for box 6, when you submit your final financial report. Box 9 through the rest of the form will be specific information for your reporting period. This instructional tracking sheet is set up so each of your reports will be drafted here prior to completing the SF425 PDF form or in the portal. For our example report, we are completing Very Good Farms report that is due on June 30th, 2025 and covers the reporting period of October 1st, 2024 through December 31st, 2024. In the tracker, I will put the report due date of 1/30/2025 here. Now I'll begin to fill in our information. In box 9, I will list the reporting period end date as 12/31/2024. The first section, section 10A through 10C, is labeled Transactions. These are related to cash receipts. Review any specific grant instructions you have received in filling out this form, or check with your grant officer if you are required to fill out this section. 10A is any cash you have received from the government. 10B is cash you have spent from what has been received. 10C is cash on hand from what has been received. For the purposes of this example, this section is not applicable to Very Good Farms, and they are not required to fill out the section. We have put 0 for 10A, 10B, and 10C. Next is the Federal Expenditures and Unobligated Balance section. Starting with 10D, this is the total amount of federal funds authorized. This amount will be the same from every financial report you submit. It is your federal grant total. Copy the total from your Notice of the Grant and Award Agreement. For Very Good Farms, their total federal award is $250,000. 10E is your federal share of expenditures. This is the sum of your expenses through the end of the reporting period. If your accounting is on a cash basis, this is the sum of all expenses paid through the end of the reporting. If your accounting is on an accrual basis, this is the sum of all expenses paid and charges owed through the end of the reporting period. As mentioned in our introduction, Very Good Farms has spent $50,000 during the reporting period of federal grant funds, so we will put $50,000 here. Box 10F is the federal share of unliquidated obligations. This box you will fill out if your accounting is on a cash basis. If your accounting is on a cash basis, you will put here the total of expenses that have been incurred but not yet paid through the reporting deadline. Our example applicant, Very Good Farms, basis of accounting is on an accrual basis, so we have put 0 for 10F. 10G is the total federal share. This is the sum of lines E and F. For our example, this is $50,000. Box 10H is the unobligated balance, which is box 10D, your total federal award, minus box 10G, the total amount of your federal award spent through the end of the reporting period. For our applicant, this is $250,000 minus $50,000, which equals $200,000. Box 10I is the total recipient share. You will only fill this out if you are required to provide a non-federal match for your grant. Your non-federal match can be found in your Notice of Award agreement. As mentioned in our example, Very Good Farms has $25,000 in matching funds required as part of their project will be listed here. If your grant does not require a match, you can put 0 here. As mentioned, Very Good Farms has provided $2,500 in match during this reporting period. This includes the value of cash match and any in-kind match through the end of the reporting period. I will put this number in box 10J. Box 10K is the remaining match required to be provided by the grant recipient. This is box I, the total recipient share required, minus box 10J, the amount provided through the reporting period. For our applicant, they have $22,500 in remaining match. The next section is program income. This covers boxes 10L, M, N, and L. Check with your grant officer if you are required to report program income. If you are not required to report program income, you will put 0 for these boxes. Our grant recipient is not required to report program income. Please note, if you have any questions about income that has been generated because of activities related to your grant award, check with your grant officer prior to filling out this section. Grant recipients are not always required to report program income, even if income is generated. Boxes 11A through F are reporting for your indirect expenses. This is where you report the amount of indirect funds you've drawn down on the award. In 11A, you'll put your type of indirect expense. This could be the de minimis rate, which is the standard allowable indirect cost rate if your organization does not have a negotiated rate. Other types could be provisional, fixed, carried forward, or agreed. If you have any questions about your rate type, ask your officer what you should put here. Very Good Farms is using the de minimis indirect rate, 15%. In box 11A, I will put de minimis. In box 11B, I will put 15. In 10C, I will enter the start date of the award here, and in box C, I will enter the end date of the reporting period. So for this example, it's 10/1/2024 through 12/31/2024. Box 11D is the base rate against which the indirect rate is applied. For example, if there were $10,000 in eligible expenses during the reporting period and you were using a 15% rate to charge $1,500 in indirect expenses to the grant, you would put $10,000 here, because that is the amount of eligible expenses you are charging the rate against. For our example, Very Good Farms, all of the $50,000 of the money expended during this period is allowable for indirect as the base rate. So our base in 11D is $50,000. Our amount charged in 11E is $50,000 times the rate of 15%, which equals $7,500. In box 11F, you will enter the federal share of your amount charged. If you are not using any match funds to cover indirect, this line will be the same as 11E. If you are using matching funds to cover indirect, this amount will be box 11E minus the amount of indirect you are providing as match through the reporting period. After you drafted your report data in this Federal Financial Report Tracker, you will copy it and paste it into your SF425 form or in the online portal. After you drafted your report data in this Federal Financial Report Tracker, you will copy it and paste it into your SF425 form or within the online portal. In the final form or within the online portal, you will complete the box 13 certification with the name, title, telephone, email, date of report submittal, and signature of your organization's certifying individual. If you are submitting the form via PDF and email, note that the USDA generally prefers a wet signature on the SF425 form. You can print it, sign it, and rescan it, or you can use Adobe to certify a signature. This module covered the basics of what you need to know to prepare for managing a federal grant. We touched on key topics, including the award agreement, project management, budget and finance, compliance considerations, and reporting. In the Module 8 Resources and Supplemental Materials, you will find a link to the Federal Demonstration Partnership Template Subaward Contracts, which you can download and customize for your needs, a link to the federal procurement regulations that are relevant for purchases and contracts, and the SF425 instruction template, which provides detailed guidance on how to complete the SF 425 financial form. This concludes Module 8, Preparing to Manage a Federal Grant. Remember, this is part of the larger Learn as You Go Grant Ready course presented by the Regional Food Business Center in the Northwest and Rocky Mountain region. You can find all the module videos, resources, templates, and more under the Learn as You Go Grant Ready course section on the Regional Food Business Center's website. Thanks for joining us, and we hope this module helps you feel more confident in managing your federal grant.